Before you start lesson 23, make sure you do test E in the test masters on circles. Lesson 23 is about subtracting mixed numbers with regrouping. Let's do an example just to understand what they mean here. Let's do 2 1/4 minus 1 3/4. Now we can look at that and see, okay, let's subtract our whole numbers. 2 minus 1 is 1. And then we get to 1/4 minus 3/4, and we don't know what to do because we can't take 3/4 from 1/4. So that's what the regrouping part on this is about. Let's go ahead and illustrate this with fraction circles, and that will help you understand how you do the regrouping. And start with 2 1/4, so we'll have 2 complete fraction circles there, and then let's just draw a quarter of another one. And let's break these up into fourths, just so you can see we have 4/4 and then another 4/4 and then a quarter. That makes 2 1/4, right? Minus 1 3/4. So we'll have 1 whole circle and then 3/4 of another circle. Now what's giving us the trouble here is trying to do 1/4 minus 3/4. We can't do that. But if you look at this, couldn't we just use 5/4 like that minus 3/4? Well, yes, you can. And therefore we'd have 5/4 minus 3/4 is 2/4. And then we subtract our whole parts. 1 minus 1, that would just be 0. So 2/4 is the answer, which we could reduce to 1/2. 2 1/4 minus 1 3/4 is equal to 1/2. Now, obviously, we don't want to have to draw fraction circles every time we do a mixed number subtraction problem. So what we need to think about is, think about that complete circle. That's one whole item. And you always work in whatever your denominator is, like work in fourths for these problems. If we had 2 1/5 minus 1 3/5, we'd be working with fifths. But what you do is borrow. That's what we call it, is borrowing. We'll borrow from this 2, so make that a 1, and we're going to add that 1 that we borrowed. We change it to 4/4. And we're adding that to the 1/4. Remember, 1 can be written as a fraction as long as the numerator and denominator are the same numbers. We borrowed 1 or 4/4 from the whole number part of that mixed number, and that gave us a fraction with a numerator bigger than the other value's numerator, and that way we could do our subtraction. Let's go ahead and do some practice problems. A is 6 minus 3 1/4. Now, just think about it. We have nothing, no fraction, minus 1/4. So we need to borrow from that 6. And we're dealing with fourths here. Change this to a 5. And we've borrowed one whole amount, which is 4/4. 5 and 4/4 is the same thing as 6. So now we can do our subtraction correctly. 4/4 minus 1/4 would be 3/4. 5 minus 3 is 2. 2 3/4. Look at B. Why don't you pause the CD on the rest of these and try to figure them out before you follow me along. 7 1/7 minus 3 3/7. We need to borrow 1 from that 7, so that makes this a 6. We've borrowed 1. In this case, that means 7/7. So we add 7/7 there, and that would give us 8/7. And if you want to, you can even just rewrite this 6 8/7, just so you don't forget anything. Now we're ready to subtract, and it doesn't matter which one we do first. We can do the whole number parts first, which would give us a 3. Then the fraction parts. 8 minus 3 would be 5/7. 3 5/7. Let's do another one. 8 1/5 minus 4/5 we can't do 1/5 minus 4/5, and really our whole number part is 8 minus 0, right? Because there's no whole number part on that second fraction. So let's just go ahead and subtract the fractions. We need to borrow. So that becomes a 7. And this, let's just call that 6/5 instead of adding a 5/5 out to the outside. Just do the 5 plus 1 in your head. So you have 6/5 minus 4/5 now, and that would be 2/5. And then 7 minus 0, that gives you 7 and 2/5 for an answer. Let's do another one. 80% minus 62 1/3%. Now in a problem like this, just don't panic. Don't worry about the percent sign at all. You just do the number part. Just pretend like the percents aren't there. And really what we're doing then is 80 minus 62 1/3. Now we don't have a fraction in that first number in 80. There's no fraction part to it. So our fraction is basically 0/3. We have to borrow 1 therefore, and that makes that a 79. Borrowing 1 whole means we change that, or we put a 3/3 there. That's equal to 1, right? So now we can do our subtraction. 79 minus 62 would be 17, and then 3/3 minus 1/3 would be 2/3. 17 and 2/3. Now let's put our percent symbol back on. 17 and 2/3%. Now you might get confused on a problem like that and think that you have to rewrite that as a fraction like 80/100 or something. That's not what they're asking you to do on this problem. Just ignore the percentages and go ahead and do your subtraction as normal like we've been doing, and then you add the percent symbol back on at the end. If you need more practice on these problems, you can do the ones in the textbook, and also anytime you see the little asterisk after the word practice in the textbook, that means there are supplementary exercises, supplementary practice problems in the back of the book for that particular lesson. And this one, there are supplementary practice problems in the back. So if you need more help on that, then go ahead and do those too. Subtracting fractions is something you want to get down really, really well. The better you know that, the easier problem solving and things that you do in your everyday life will be. Okay, well that's all for lesson 23.